Hi, my name is Kim Harrison. I've been a member of the Hudson Mohawk Weavers Guild since about 1991, but several years ago I moved back to Virginia, where I had been raised, and I have continued to keep up my membership, and I keep coming back up north to New York every fall for the show. It's just such a great experience. I get to see my friends, I get to be inspired by all the work they do. I really enjoy working at the show, and so I just keep coming back. I'm going to talk to you today about how I make mittens, and I start with sheep. I raise sheep. I have raised sheep for about 30 some years now. I raise merino sheep, which are known for their very fine, soft wool. And I really, really enjoy working with both the sheep, taking care of them, and also working with their wool. So this first slide is one of our ram lambs. Just happens to be all dolled up to go to a show. But this is a merino, pretty classic, white-faced, white wool. We also have colored sheep. We have black and a color that's called morit, which is sort of like a chocolate lab. This next picture is the fleece directly after it's shorn off of the sheep. I have a professional shearer who comes once a year. We also sell raw fleece as well as yarn, so I get the professional to do it, so she does a good job. There's a lot of work that goes into managing the sheep and taking care to make sure you get a good quality product. So it's more than just having sheep and happen to having someone cut the wool off of it. I do send the raw fleece to a mill to be spun. I know how to spin wool. I have a spinning wheel, but I could never spin all the wool that my sheep produce. I have about 25 or 30 sheep, and I could never spin all that wool, and I could never spin enough to weave as much as I want to weave. Weaving really uses up yarn. So I send the raw wool off like 100 pounds at a time, and it comes back to me on cones, which I then use in my weaving. This is a picture of the warp that's going to go on a loom. This is a white warp, obviously, and I'm about to dye it. It's laying on the ground out here on this piece of plastic because the warp is way too big. This warp is way too big to put in a pot and dye it. So I use the power of the sun to set the dye. The dyes that I use strike at about 150 degrees. And on a sunny day, warm day here in Virginia, when you wrap something up in plastic like this, it gets to 150 degrees pretty easy. So I do it this way as opposed to trying to wrestle this into a big vat of hot water. Here's the warp when I've just sprinkled the dye on it. It looks like kind of a mess right now, but after this picture was taken, I like sprinkle some more water on it, and I fold the plastic over, and then I basically do a little dance on it in my bare feet, which will squish the dye into the fibers a little bit, and then I leave it there to bake in the sun for the rest of the day. I just walk away and don't touch it. Here it is. You see it looks a lot better now, and this is just hanging up on the clothesline to dry. The next thing I have to do is wind some yarn to dye for the weft. I'm making mittens, as I said, and this particular batch of mittens, I had a little girl who wanted, of course, she wanted pink mittens. So I was dyeing a lot of fun, cheerful colors, but this is a skein winder that I use to wind skeins so that I can dye them. You'll see the cones there on the floor. That's how the wool comes back to me from the mill, on those cones. But to dye it, I have to wind it into skeins. And because these skeins are smaller than that big warp I showed you, I can put them in a pot. Here's the kind of mixed up here now in the order of things just to show you. But here's that warp that's all dyed, and I'm putting it on the loom now. This is called beaming, and I'm winding that warp around and around. You can kind of see the cardboard there on the bottom of the picture. That's to keep the layers of warp from digging into each other as I wind them on. So it just winds it up like it's a big roll of paper towels. Then each thread has to be threaded through these heddles. If you can see, each thread goes through a little eye on the loom, and then there's the picture of the big coil, I guess I'll call it, of warp that's all beamed onto the loom there, and so you can see the cardboard really well now. That's keeping it from getting all tangled up inside in itself. Here's some more of the warp going through the heddles. Now we've skipped back over to the weft yarn, those skeins of yarn that I'm dyeing in a pot. I have an electric roaster I got from Goodwill that makes a really nice dye pot. I can keep it out in the garage. I don't do any of this in my kitchen. And so I'm dyeing using hot water, but not boiling, just skein or two at a time, some different colors. See, I did all these bright, pretty colors to go with my pink and orangey warp. Like, I thought the little girl would like some of these colors, if not all. Then I have to there's a lot of yarn handling that goes into weaving. You're just constantly manipulating the yarn into one form or another so you can use it better. Those skeins that were so pretty hanging there, they're really not, useful. You got to wind them up to make so you can handle it better. So this is called a swift. Each skein goes on this swift, and then I wind it on the ball winder. And you just turn the crank and it winds it up into a ball. And there I have all those skeins. They're now wound up into balls, which are much easier to handle because I have to wind them onto bobbins. And this is the bobbin is the thing that will go in the shuttle so that I can actually weave on the loom. Remember, I have the loom all warped up. It was all beamed and all threaded, and here's what I was weaving. I love that green color, and I think it looks really good with the pink and the orange there. And this is how it looks on the loom. There's another shot of the loom. You can see it on the left there is where the weaving has just finished, and if you see on the right, that's where the warp used to be wound up on that cardboard. I've come to the very end of it, and if you look to the left, down on the bottom of the picture, there's the cloth that I wove all wound up now. This is how the cloth looked when I took it off the loom. I took it outside, and I was just admiring the changes in color, both in the warp and the weft. I was very happy with the way it came out. And this is the fabric after I washed it. To make the mittens and other things I make from my wool, I will put the wool cloth in my washing machine with hot water and agitate it carefully. I want it to shrink, but I don't want it to shrink up so much that it becomes a wad or a board or anything horrible. So this is what it looks like after I washed it. Here you can see. Again, I'm very happy with the way this came out. I love the colors. I love the cheerfulness and the brightness of it. Here I'm about to cut it into a mitten. This is a pattern that I made myself. I have it in several different sizes, and you have to make two. You have to make a left and a right. It's not a, it's not a, what's the word I want? Anyway, it needs a right and a left hand. So when I cut two, you'll see that I have the right and the left there, and I fold them up and sew them like this. And then I have two mittens now. I'm going to, because these are children's mittens, I'm going to knit cuffs on them. For some adult mittens, I just kind of have a longer fabric cuff, and I just trim the edge with a little crochet to make it look nice. For these kids' mittens, I'm going to actually knit a cuff on them. And I do that by picking up stitches on a set of double-pointed needles right through the fabric like this. And this is what it looks like when I'm all done. There's the mittens. And these mittens, I think she chose the ones with the pink cuffs. The little girl who asked for these mittens was an ice skater, and she wanted these mittens to wear when she was practicing. She skated year-round, and I guess when you fall down on that ice, it hurts and it's cold, and so she love these wool mittens for keeping her hands warm. I thank you very much for listening. I love to weave. I love to work with my own wool. I love raising the sheep. I'm really happy that I can come up to New York every year and see all my friends and all the customers that I know, and I look forward to doing it next year when we're able to do that again. Bye bye.